everyone, I'm Ruth Dolman, Chair of the Walford Parish Council NDP Committee. Welcome to the second of our live presentations, which is in two parts. The first is about the policies we are planning to submit in the draft NDP, and the second is about the housing options and explores how each of these could affect the parish. You can view or download both presentations. Details on how to do so will be shown on the screen later. At the end of this presentation, you can ask questions by email to the NDP email address shown at the bottom of the screen, and we invite you to share your views by completing our questionnaire. You can also ask questions later by email, post, or online. As you can see, we have a questions and answer panel with us here tonight, to whom I will be putting your questions. So I'll quickly introduce them to you. First, we have Andrew Delahaye, who lives in the parish, was chair of the former NDP steering group, and is actively involved in the NDP committee. Then we have Chris Barron, who also lives in the parish and was a member of the former steering group, and is still an active member of the current NDP committee. Chris also has specific responsibilities for keeping track of the project plan and finances. And last but not least, we have Bill Bloxham, who is an independent planning consultant from Leominster and has helped over 30 parish councils produce their NDP. Okay, so let's see the pre-recorded presentation, which is narrated by Andrew Delahaye.
This is the second presentation about the NDP and deals with two subjects. Firstly, the policies that the Parish Council is planning on submitting in the draft NDP. Secondly, the housing options to achieve the minimum target of 91 houses between 2011 and 2031. So what is a policy? It's a set of principles to guide decisions and achieve rational outcomes. This is how we want to influence the Herefordshire planners to take account of the development wishes of the parish. These will go into the draft NDP, and there will be policies covering a range of subjects and not just housing. There are a total of 23 policies in the NDP covering subjects like sustainability, major development, conservation, pollution and flooding, highways, business, telecoms, and also housing. We want to go into a bit of detail on 4 policies that were highlighted as the most important subjects to the parish in the 2014 questionnaire and the public consultations in February 2020. These are wastewater, flooding, housing design, and sustainable development. If you want to go into more detail on any of these policies or any of the others, you can read all about them in the draft NDP on the NDP website. The wastewater policy deals with sewer capacity and also the requirements for developers to show that foul drainage will not cause pollution. The flood risk policy requires all developments to be subject to national tests to establish risk. Where risk exists, then mitigation is required to deal with that risk. Also, any development must not cause an increase in surface water flooding. The housing design policy is one of the longer ones and covers respecting rural character, so avoiding urban designs. Designs that are sympathetic to the character of the parish as well as sensitive to the existing landscape. New developments should also ensure adequate garden sizes. Plus, developments will need to contribute to a range of sizes, types and tenures, not just large detached houses for sale at market rates. The policy dealing with sustainable development is about ensuring that houses will be energy efficient as well as dealing with the environment and the social needs of the residents. Finally, the housing policies will be finalised with the details of the housing options that we are consulting you on. This will specify where housing is located, as well as the sizing of those developments. You can read all of the policies in more detail in the draft NDP on the NDP website. This is the end of the policies section of the presentation. Once again, we encourage you to read the draft NDP and make comments or ask questions via the comments function on the NDP website, or by email to the NDP email address, or in writing to the clerk. This is the last section of the consultation on the NDP and deals with the way we might choose the suitable sites we talked about in the first presentation to meet the housing target of a minimum of 91 houses between 2011 and 2031. Walford Parish Council has to decide how to accommodate a minimum of an additional 51 houses by 2031 to meet that target. No decisions about housing allocation have been made yet, and your voice can influence the outcome. This is the last part of the consultation, and we will go into more details on the 5 options identified for meeting the target. Once again, it would be useful to have your views on the approach to take for Walford Parish. To recap what we said in the last presentation, Walford Parish Council needs to define how it wants to meet its housing target. The target is for a minimum of 91 between 2011 and 2031, and the current shortfall is 51. From the site assessment report, we found that 8 sites were suitable and that these could accommodate the shortfall of 51 houses. These were ranked in order of suitability. The ranking is a result of prior consultation feedback. We also defined 5 reasonable alternative options for meeting the target and need to choose just one to include in the NDP that goes forward. We want your thoughts about which would be the best approach, so this presentation gives some details of the choices before us. Here are the options again. We will explore the meaning of each one in the following slides. We have some choices which are not straightforward. We also have to work within the constraints of the local planning policies, the national planning policies and regulations, as well as the NDP process, where an independent examiner will assess the viability and certainty of our choices. For instance, if we have to decide if we want to allocate housing sites to show how we want to meet the target. If we choose to do this, then we have a big say in the size and location of housing developments. If we choose not to, then the process is run by Herefordshire Council planners as it is today, and we would have little or no say. We also have to decide what size of housing developments we might want in Walford. Choosing only small and medium-sized sites does not automatically meet the target, and this choice will be tested by Herefordshire Council and then by the independent examiner. If we choose an option that the examiner thinks is not certain enough, then we have to start again and go through 2 series of consultations again, which represents a timescale of about a year. We can also choose if we want to spread housing around the parish. The list of choices will appear in the questionnaire. The sites range in housing capacity from 3 up to 65 houses. So to help you understand these, we have laid these out in maps and colour-coded them to make it a little bit more visible. Option 1. Because we have to find sites for 51 houses still, option 1 is about using one large site, 11R, which can take 40 houses, and several small to medium-sized sites to make up the difference. However, there are many combinations of small or medium sites to make up the difference, so we've laid out some of the better ones here. Combination 1 takes site 11R and adds the minimum number of sites required in rank order to meet the target, so the best sites. Combination 2 takes site 11R and adds the least number of additional sites to meet the target, so the least sites. Combination 3 takes site 11R and adds the sites which come to the exact requirement of 51 houses, so the least houses. Combination 4 takes site 11R and adds sites spread out across the settlements to reach the target, so spread out sites, not just one place. For each of the options, we have identified some advantages and disadvantages to consider. If you have any of your own thoughts on these, please let us know. The advantage of option 1 is that it provides for some affordable housing and enables a variety of differing sizes of developments. It also gives us a degree of certainty by selecting one site which can get us most of the way to our target. The disadvantage is that it includes one large site that has a greater impact on the landscape. Option 2 is all about using only small to medium sites to avoid large development. The small and medium sites would only add up to 42 houses in total, in other words 9 short, so we would need to rely on additional planning applications either in or adjacent to settlements or in the open countryside. We called this windfall allowance in the site assessment report and estimated that there might be 17 dwellings by 2031 by this route. Option 2 concentrates on the small and medium sizes of housing, which was expressed often in the consultations so far. It also provides an element of affordable housing and spreads the developments around the parish. However, it does not get us to the target and runs the risk of rejection by the independent examiner. Option 3 is about taking the ranked list of sites and starting at the top, in other words the best sites, and working down the list until we meet or exceed the target. Now, to be sure of meeting the target of 51 by 2031, we can go beyond the target of 51 if we wish. Option 3 enables us to utilise the most suitable sites offered, and we can cut off the list at a number that gives certainty to achieve the target. It gives a high degree of certainty to meet the target. However, it involves a large site, which is contrary to the feedback from the parish so far. Option 4 is really about whether we want to allocate any sites at all. The alternative is to allow the Herefordshire planners to carry on using the core strategy policies to determine each planning application. If we have some housing policies in our NDP, then they would have to use these too, but we would have little or no say over which sites are best for Walford Parish. Option 4 provides the greatest flexibility of all options, but leaves the choice to Herefordshire Council and landowners and developers as to where houses are located. Herefordshire Council would then have no limit to development. Option 5 is about having one large development where all of the houses to meet the target would be allocated. This site would be a combination of site 11R and 21, which would provide for 40 houses from site 11R plus either 25 or 65 from site 21. Option 5 provides for the most number of affordable houses of all options and gives high confidence that the target will be met. It may well, however, be considered to be too large. Once again, we would welcome your comments and questions. We would also like to capture your views on the options by answering the questions in a short questionnaire. The questionnaire asks for your opinion on the approach to be taken, not on a specific option. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned to find out how to make your voice heard.
Okay, so we've got a couple of very long emails, both of which have several questions on them. So I'm going to go back and forth between the two and then intersperse others that come in. So the first question is from Peter Dunn, who is presenting all of his questions on a select, well, it says by residents. He doesn't say how many residents. So the first one that on his list is, there are two sites yet to be assessed, which could negate the need for the windfall allowance, and therefore the requirement of a larger site. Can the council confirm that these sites, as stated in the meeting on Wednesday, will be assessed and the results of the assessments be taken into consideration prior to approval of the NDP by the Parish Council and submission of the NDP under Section 14 of Herefordshire Council? Basically, yes. As stated, this may negate the requirement for a larger site, and when will the revised document then be published? I think, Bill, if you could answer that part of it for us, please.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll be able to go out soon, after the end of March, and when things are sufficiently opened up, to assess the remaining two sites, and I will produce an addendum which will be presented to the Parish Council, and then hopefully that will be before or around about the same time as the questionnaire results will be out, so that the two, the first report, the main report, and all the addendums plus the questionnaire will be available for the Parish Council to mull over before determining what housing sites it wishes to put forward for the formal consultation with residents, and also the other consultees. There are statutory consultees that you must consult on those, and that includes Herefordshire Council and the Environment Agency.
Lovely, thank you, Bill. Next question I'm going to take from John and Bazina Bush. First question is, please confirm that when the questionnaire is sent out, that both presentations and narrative will be included with the document. Not all have access to IT, and due to COVID restrictions have not been able to get stamps, etc. This is evidenced by the few being returned without stamps, as stated in the last meeting, and by only a very small number of residents requesting them. This will ensure all residents have the information in order to being able to consider the responses as required by the questionnaire. Short answer is yes. All of that will be sent out together following this presentation. So now I'm going to take another one from Peter Dunn, who says, in reply to a question at the NDP committee meeting on the 10th of March, Ruth Dolman, that's me, replied that if the public gave a clear indication that smaller sites were preferred, then 11R and 21 would not be put forward. However, Andrew Delahaye contradicted this by saying a large site would have to be in the plan. Now, I think Peter has taken part of what I said and not all of what I said. So I think we need to clarify the full context. The context of my words in their entirety was that the criterion used to evaluate the sites was derived from the previous consultations. Therefore, public opinion of those that took part at that time. This criterion has resulted in site 11R being ranked in top in terms of its suitability for development, which is now unpopular with a proportion of our parishioners. Should this consultation result show the majority of public opinion being that a site of this size is opposed to, then the new council elected in May will consider these results before deciding on which option to enter into the NDP documents. It is therefore important that we undertake this extra voluntary consultation to evaluate the current public opinion. And Andrew, in my opinion, was trying to explain why we have to include housing options which include a large site or sites, as Herefordshire Council will not accept the exclusion of sites which have been ranked as most suitable for development without good reason. So these large sites have to be included in the options for decision making and then included or not included in the draft NDP with reasons for accepting or rejecting, which will be the job of the Walford Parish Council after the elections in May. Andrew, do you want to add anything to that, or did I get my understanding of what you were saying correct?
I think you did a very good job, Ruth, and I'd just like to apologise if I confused the matter, because I was talking about the need to have all the suitable sites in consideration for the Walford Parish Council, with the feedback from the parish, and therefore there had to be at least one option with a large site in. And once you've got one option with the large site in, then you probably need, the parish council needs to know, well, if that one option, if the large site was included, then what other combinations of sites would the parish want to go with that? So I wasn't talking about having two options in the plan or having a large site in the plan. I was talking about needing to have all the options on the table.
Thank you, Andrew. So I'll take another one from John and Bazina Bush. Their second question is, as concerned residents, why are large housing developments still being considered by the NDP? It is clear to us following attendance at the public communications, this is going against the views and sentiments of the public in Cowton and Walford. Would somebody like to take that?
I think, as we've said before, we are required by the process to look at all viable sites, and the parish council will have to look at all viable sites. They can then choose to not put those sites forward, provided there are good reasons for such, which is part of the reason for consulting with the parish. At the end of the day, Herefordshire Council, as a consultee, as Bill has said, will take a view, and at the end of and Herefordshire Council have to be satisfied with the solution that's put forward. So therefore, if they are not dissatisfied with it, they will come back and express that dissatisfaction. The parish council will then have to decide precisely what to do.
Thank you, Chris. The next question I'm going to take is from Keith Steele, which is along the same lines, but refers to somebody else's NDP. He says, I read with interest the following from the Walford NDP website. These policies have already set out the increase in housing the government believes is necessary, with Walford Parish required to provide 91 new dwellings between 2011 and 2031. In the absence of an NDP, that requirement will be implemented without any local input. It would seem to me that whether we use an NDP or not, the parishioners will not have any input when basic questions as to why the Walford NDP are still pursuing large developments against public sentiment. I do not believe there is a requirement to propose a development that goes against the wishes of the parishioners, despite this being inferred at the NDP meeting on Wednesday by Andrew Delahaye. The Bridstow NDP, which has been submitted to Herefordshire Council, removed the large sites from their proposed options as it was against the wishes of the parishioners. I think, could you take that one for us?
Yes, if I can, Ruth, because I helped Bridstow with their NDP, and there's no doubt that Bridstow Parish had certainly very challenging in finding sites for theirs. They did have 2 large sites, but they didn't actually withdraw them to a large extent. They were actually withdrawn by the landowners. Those 2 sites, the one at the end of Bannertree Lane and one down by the church, by the duchy, those 2 large sites were actually withdrawn before they actually got to finish their site assessment works. They did include a number of medium-sized sites and rejected 2 of those, substantially upon highway and landscape reasons. That's why they had particular problems there. But they didn't delete the larger sites. They considered it as an option, but at the end of the day, there were issues that they raised with the landowners, such that the landowners decided they wouldn't wish to progress the sites. Bridstow NDP is presently going through its Regulation 16, so they have yet to get a formal response from Herefordshire Council on their amended plan. And of course, it will then, if Herefordshire Council are happy for it to proceed, it will then go to the external examiner. Hasn't gone past the Regulation 16 process yet. That's a second formal consultation. I apologize because I haven't explained that.
Can I add something to that?
Thank you, Bill. Yes, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, because I think the key issue here, we keep hearing it, it's coming back time and time again, is why are we still thinking about large sites when in the questionnaire it was clear, in the consultation last year it was clear, and now we're asking that question again. And there's a couple of answers I have in my mind, and one is that a lot's changed since the consultation in February 2020. We do have a lot more sites. We've had them all assessed. We've done a lot of research and evaluation of what policies to put in the NDP. The picture has become much richer and clearer as to what the NDP might look like and what the site's profile might look like. So we want to really see if we can confirm the feedback we've had in the past or whether it's changed. Probably it hasn't, but that's why we're doing the questionnaire, to reconfirm, given the richer knowledge base that we have now. And I've forgotten the second one.
Oh dear.
So excuse me for that, but that's you know, it's at least one good reason why we want to do it again.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Andrew and Bill, for those. I'm going to take a question now from a Mark Lindley, who asks, please confirm when the count of houses already built was last updated, i.e., do we still need 51?
I'll have a go at that as well.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yep. So every April, or after every April, Herefordshire Council does its count of commitments in each of the parishes, and it does it for Walford as well, of course. So the figures that we have in our reports and at the moment are all based on last April. So we're now in March 2021. In April 2021 or sometime shortly afterwards, Herefordshire Council will do the same exercise. So no, we don't have the correct numbers. In our NDP, we're obliged to use the numbers that, that Herefordshire Council gives us, but there have been some new commitments. I'm not aware of any, I'm not aware of any that have been completed in terms of build, but there are a few more commitments. Warryfield Barnes, for instance, is another 4 So we keep a log of all the houses that are, all the sites that are approved and the houses that are approved, and keep our own tally. And then we're planning this year to, as last year, to double check it with Herefordshire Council to make sure we're on the same page. So the number has gone down. And if you look at various documentation we've produced over the course of the project, you'll see it's gone down, and it continues to go down. And that's where windfall allowance we've referenced in the site assessment report comes from, or comes in. So yeah, we'll be tackling this again with Herefordshire Council shortly.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, I've got quite a few coming in through live chat questions now. Some of them have already been covered, so I'm going to try and filter them so that we're not continually, going over old ground. We want to be more diverse in the answers that we're giving. We've got one here from Janine Liddell. Have the Parish Council managed... Oh no, that's the one you've just done. Won't do that one. Some of them are just comments. Has Walford NDP challenged Herefordshire Council on the number of properties required?
Go
ahead, Bill. Oh, sorry, go on, Chris.
No. Look, I was going to say, I'm sure Bill can give a much more authoritative answer than I can.
I think Bill was about to.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, no, you can't challenge the percentage growth levels. That would have had to have been done when Herefordshire Council approved its core strategy, and that would have been considered by a planning inspector at the public inquiry into the into the core strategy back in 2015. But that figure is set. However, if, for example, you're able to prove that you cannot accept those houses by having insufficient suitable sites, that may be a reason for going to Herefordshire Council and say we cannot make the numbers you require. At the moment, I don't believe that is the case, but of course the Regulation 14 consultation will in fact get responses from Herefordshire Council, which is also the Highway Authority, which will address the issues not just within the parish but the wider network, and I know that's been raised as an issue, but that's something they will comment upon, and also people like the Environment Agency who will talk about or look at the various issues to do with flooding. There are obviously other agencies to consult that you must consult, for example, Natural England. They would cover things like the designated sites and things like agricultural land. And there is obviously Historic England, and they will comment upon anything that might affect heritage assets.
Okay, I've got a funny one here. It's from, not really sure how this goes. It's from a Keith Steele. It says, with COVID lockdown about to end soon, could you not put the matter on hold and let all parishioners have their say? And then there's a note from Bob. Bridstow are undertaking the formal consultation online only. So we're not the only ones. We're not the only parish council doing this. And, time will tell when we get the questionnaires back whether we've reached a large enough proportion of the populace. I think in the last consultation, it was the feedback was only from, what was it, 28%, I think I heard. Could anybody clarify that for me? I think it was 28%.
I think what's happening at Bridstow is that the county council are now doing a consultation. There will be more consultations. So the formal consultation, when people can formally object to sites and ask more questions upon the site, will follow later. And hopefully that will be when the COVID restrictions have gone. This is an informal consultation to gauge some sort of response from the public on the housing options only. But when you actually look at the formal consultation at Regulation 14, you will have the whole of the plan before you, where you can see how the housing sites fit in with the wider context of the plan. And that will, as I said, that will be a formal consultation that the parish will have to carry out.
Lovely. I'm going to take another one from Peter Dunn. His next question is concerning Bridstow. So, you know, we've already covered that several times already. So moving on to his next question. Has the Parish Council approached Herefordshire Council with justification? We've covered that as well. Fourth question. The NDP's suggestion that sites 6 and 7, 11R and 21 are best placed for public transport, we would dispute. Many other sites are within walking distance of public transport. Additionally, the service is not of the quality that would deter people from using cars. The bus service is every 2 hours for most of the day and finishes at 6:30 to 7 p.m. with no service on Sundays. This service is not utilised currently, and increasing the housing is unlikely to change this. Therefore, a reduction in our carbon footprint is not a feasible argument and should be removed from the justification in the NDP. Would anybody like to have a go at that one? I think it's a statement more than a question, but
yeah, I mean, obviously Bishop's Wood is also on the public transport route, but I think you need to bear in mind and look within the context of Herefordshire, in that many settlements throughout the county have had to provide housing, and quite a few of them, from my experience, have far poorer public transport links than Walford and Cowton and Bishop's Wood. Many of them don't have any, but I think that's an issue which Herefordshire Council took into account when it produced its rural housing background paper, but to set the totals and to set the approach which you have to fit in with. So I say, yeah, Bishop's Wood is on a link, yeah, fine, as is Walford and Cowton. Howell Hill isn't. But having said that, you know, you need to look at that in the round as well. There are certainly an issue to take into account, but would it rule out sites? I would suggest it wouldn't, not when you're dealing with planning applications.
Thank you, Bill. I've got another really, well, I've got another email which is pages long. I think it's too much for me to even read out. So I'm going to have to apologise to Beth, Harry and Lyra Rogers. Your email is just so incredibly long. I'll try and pick out one question from it. I can see a question mark. Please be assured that all of these questions will be answered to you by email, and they will be included in the log that goes onto the website and will be submitted to Herefordshire Council. But I just, to be fair to everybody, I can't sit here and read the entire email. So I'm going to try and pick out. Here we go, pylons. We've not had a question about pylons. It says site 21 has pylons running throughout it. Surely, as with site 11, which also has a pylon, it would be in the planners and developers' best interests to build somewhere that did not have pylons. The pylons in that field will be flagged up on any house/building survey that potential house buyers request, and would surely lower the value of the houses built there for that reason.
I think we did look at this issue, and it was part of the assessment. It was a feature or an issue that we looked at, and the actual definition of site 21 excludes the areas under the pylons and also gives a corridor width which is actually greater than the corridor width that was required at Butler's Meadow. I think there were 2 houses built there. I think that was a 6 metre width. We're looking probably at an 8 metre corridor either side of the electricity pylons. And of course, the National Grid will be consulted upon the draft plan at the Regulation 14 stage. They're a consultee which Herefordshire Council advises that we go to.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, I'm going to have another flick through this long email from John and Bazina and see if there's any others in there that we haven't already covered. Should the NDP recommend housing developments on the agricultural fields, what actions can the councillors and the NDP committee take to prevent additional houses or other developments being built on the current or adjacent fields? Is that clear, or do you want me to read it again?
I think there are 2 issues there. Should they be building on agricultural land? And once that land has been built on, will there be pressure to develop adjacent to it? I think, are those?
Yeah, I'll read it again. Should the NDP recommend housing developments on the agricultural fields, what actions can the councillors and the NDP committee take to prevent additional houses or other developments being built on the current or adjacent fields?
Well, first of all, in relation to agricultural land, you should always try to build on land of a lower quality if it's at all possible. But generally, and that was an issue that we looked at in terms of assessing the differences between sites. But it's not the only issue, it is a issue. How important it is depends upon the size of the site. And Natural England generally takes the view that something of 20 hectares is something that they would wish to be consulted directly upon, although you can look at the issues on smaller sites. But they look at the issue is it a substantial development? Is it an unsustainable development? And is it an inappropriate development? And I think in relation to those issues, for any of the sites that you've come for, well, for most of the sites that you've got there, I think really you could say it's not really coming up to those standards to consider. Now, in relation to adjacent sites, once you've set your settlement boundary, that then defines where you would like to see development. There are certain provisions that are set out by government in its policy guidance, which allows development to go beyond that if and when those conditions apply. One of those is if Herefordshire Council does not have a 5-year housing land supply, which it doesn't. However, it does have a 3-year housing land supply, which therefore means that your neighbourhood plan will be as strong as it possibly can be for at least 2 years to enable the council to try and get its housing land supply in order. That may change over a period of time because the Herefordshire Council are moving away from, the government are moving away from just saying a 5-year housing land supply to include the housing delivery. But I'm not totally sure how that would apply in the future, how the guidance would change for that. But all I can say is that once you've got your plan approved and it details sufficient land to meet Herefordshire Council and the external examiners' requirements, it will be as strong as it possibly can be for at least 2 years.
Lovely,
Bill,
thank you.
Could I just clarify that with Bill? So if we have an NDP with allocated sites and with settlement boundaries, then we would provide a high degree, for at least 2 years, a high degree of protection of creep, of development outside the settlements.
That's right, yes.
And if we had an NDP which didn't allocate sites, then what would the picture be?
Well, if you don't allocate sites, then you haven't met the housing requirements of the NPPF, and therefore the court, you refer back to the core strategy, which is it development within or adjacent to the built-up area of the settlement? And that would then apply. That's as an example of that, that's happened in Ledbury, where they didn't define a settlement boundary or allocate any housing sites.
So did that lead to continuous creep out into the countryside?
Well, I mean, that depends upon your other policies. That only applies to your housing policies. There may well be other policies in your plan which will remain strong
Yes.
until your plan is reviewed or it's superseded by the review of the core strategy.
I guess what I'm getting at is with an NDP with a housing allocation, then there's more protection for development creep outside the settlements.
Yes, I believe it does. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a question from Mark Lindley concerning site 14. He says, site 14 seems to have many huge benefits. Close to good road links, close to regular public transport routes, within walking/cycling distance of town and schools, close to sewer works requiring less potential upgrades. Should these benefits be weighed more heavily? What is the difference between the effect on scenic beauty between site 14 and site 21? How was the ridgeline defined, i.e. from which direction is the site extremely prominent?
Site 14 extends right out. If you actually go and look from Lincoln's Hill, you can see a ridge line there quite easily, and the site that was proposed extended right over the hill and down the other side onto the Walford side, and it's clearly visible from quite some distances and from the very, very prominent places. And it's a very, very large site in that regard. I did look at whether or not you could reduce the site. The problem you've got there is Lincoln's Hill is not particularly satisfactory in terms of access because it's both its horizontal and its vertical alignments, and you would still have to push the development further over the ridge line in order to get access to a suitable area of land. And I felt that given the sensitivity of that area, which is defined in the sensitivity analysis that's been produced for Ross Town by Herefordshire Council, and it referred to in its landscape character assessment that those areas were very, very sensitive. Well, sorry, that area was very, very sensitive, and it wasn't necessarily flat and low-lying land, and it would look separate to what the edge that it has at the moment. There is a fairly distinct edge at that point.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, I've got a comment in from Janine Liddell. Ross is in excess of the requirement. Can that not be taken into account? We do not have the infrastructure to cope with more houses, i.e. doctors, roads and schools.
You might be referring back to Bridgestow again, because Bridgestow have an agreement with Ross-on-Wye that they may take 15 of their houses. But the agreement with Ross-on-Wye says only if you've used all the efforts that you possibly can to identify sufficient sites, then you can have your 15 houses from our over provision. So you'd have to prove to be able to do that, that you have to prove that you've not been able to meet your requirement and use your best efforts for that. And at the moment, you can't do that. If at the regulation 14 stage, Herefordshire Council comes back and says, for example, we wouldn't be prepared to accept further development along the B4234 because of the junction into Ross. Then you've got a different kettle of fish, because you'll be able to then argue to Herefordshire Council, and more importantly to the external examiner, that Herefordshire Council's Highways Department would not support the level of development that's been set by the core strategy, and then potentially come to some sort of agreement with Ross on Wye Town Council.
Thank you, Bill. We've got another question or a comment from Bazina. What about the two sites that Bill is to, she's put access, I assume she means assess. Surely the committee needs to put on hold the reports and the consultations, as the two sites must be included for objectivity. Would somebody like to give Bill a rest?
Yeah, I'll try and give Bill a rest.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so we've obviously been dealing with the 7 sites that have been assessed so far, and it's painted a picture of what sort of stock of sites we have and how suitable they are, and gives us the opportunity to figure out what the available options are that would be quite reasonable. When the 2 sites have been assessed, which won't be too long now, but they should fit into one or other of those options. And the way we've structured the questionnaire, which you'll be able to fill in starting after this meeting, and more on that later, you'll be asked questions not about the sites or about not specific sites or specific options, but more about the approach we should take. So, for instance, should we allocate housing at all? Should we use, what sort of sizes of sites should we be using? So all those sites that are still to be assessed, if they are deemed suitable, which hasn't happened yet, but if they're deemed suitable, then they would fit into one of those size pockets, and they would fit into the other questions. And so the questionnaire will give us information which is not site specific. So we'll be able to deal with those 2 and any others that might come along and be assessed later through the answers to the questionnaire.
I think what we should, yes, I was going to say, Ruth, I think the point we need to stress is that, as we've said before, sites can be offered up and should be considered right up to the point that the draft NDP is considered finished and submitted to Herefordshire Council. So to stop at any one point now, nobody can look into far enough into the future to know whether somebody else might want to put a site in tomorrow. So it's a question of you've got to have a practical way of dealing with this, and I think and hope the way that's been put forward is practical. And at the end of the day, the decision on what option or what set of sites to put forward in the NDP remains with the Parish Council, and therefore they would consider any new sites and the assessment before they made that decision, hopefully.
Lovely, thank you for that, Chris. Okay, so I'm afraid we've just about run out of time. So I'm going to do, I've got one more from Peter Dunn, which I want to address. He says, his last comment, it was pleasing to see the NDP have taken our comments about the questionnaire on board. However, we do not know to what extent, as we have not had sight of the changes. Appreciate there is probably no requirement to share this, but given that you found our input extremely helpful, it was expected you would share it, and at the least it would have been courteous to do so. I apologise if you feel that way, Mr. Dunn, and all the other people that raised the same concerns. It was a decision on my part, purely because I didn't want all the questions that were raised this evening to be about the questionnaire. I wanted the questions to concentrate on the presentation that's just been given. So I just wanted to avoid not being able to answer the questions that were more relevant to the presentation and not be still answering questions on the questionnaire, which we did take everybody's feedback on, and it has been completely independently put together. So I hope that everybody watching will go ahead and download the questionnaire or fill the questionnaire in online, and give us your feedback, because everybody's voice should be heard. So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. We hope that you found the presentation useful. Any unanswered questions, as I've already said, will appear on the NDP website, and individual emails will be answered, and you'll be able to read the answers later. Walford Parish Council want to know your views before deciding the combination of sites to use in the NDP documents. Please have your say, complete the questionnaire, and encourage others to do so too. The deadline for doing this is the 15th of April. Details on how to view or download the presentations, the housing assessment report and the questionnaire, along with how to ask questions, will appear on your screen shortly. Thank you all for your time, and we look forward to receiving your views.